It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this session. Professor Field established the Breaking New Ground BNG Resource Center in 1979 and has provided leadership for it for 38 years. He has been involved in all aspects of the BNG programming, including the development of resources, conducting research, designing adaptive aids, and providing on-site services for farm and ranch families dealing with disabling conditions. Dr. Field has been the PD for the NAP since 1990, with the exception of a short period while NAP was located with the University of Wisconsin. Since 1990, the AgrAbility program has grown from 8 SHRAPs to 20. Over the past 2 decades, Dr. Field has managed millions of dollars in grants, contracts, and gifts related to rural disability issues. These include grants from Deere and Company, NIDER, RSA, USDA, NIFA, CDC, Indiana Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, NEC Foundation of America, and CHS Foundation. He has participated in rural disability-related events in most U.S. states, 4 Canadian provinces, and several foreign countries. Please welcome Dr. Bill Field.
Okay. All right. I apologize. This is the second webinar we've done. This is actually working better than the one I did at Penn State this morning, but I think we're all suffering with the same kinds of issues. So I appreciate everybody's patience. And so I won't spend a lot of time on the overview, but those are the topics we're going to try to get through here today. So as far as the, just a little bit of background about myself, I don't see myself as a fundraiser, and I think most of us don't see ourselves as fundraisers, but I think we probably have more potential than most of us think. My first real fundraising activity was gleaning corn in fields in upstate New York for my FFA chapter, where we raised money for field trips and trips to the state fair and other kinds of events. And then we also sold about 1,000 cases of oranges that were overpriced out of Florida to local consumers who bought them mostly because they like to support FFA chapters. I've been on the faculty here since '77. And as noted, we began the Breaking New Ground Resource Center in '78, '79 in that time period. It started initially as a $5,000 grant from John Deere, based on the early work we did at trying to install a lift on a 4-wheel drive John Deere tractor. They were impressed with that, sent us a unsolicited gift to move forward, and that began the work that we've been doing ever since. I've served on several nonprofit boards, both at the national and state level, and I've struggled with times of desperation, including a couple of nonprofits that folded after 9/11, when people's giving were really directed towards the impact of 9/11 attacks, and a lot of small nonprofits went out of business. For about 11 years, I operated a therapeutic horseback riding program. We had 3 full-time staff. We had I can't remember, 16, 17 horses, and a contract with a riding arena to use it during off times. And that was all funded by mostly small gifts and contributions that came in from the region. We had about 65 children that did riding, and then we expanded into adults, and then turned that over. That split into 2 different riding programs. And one of them still continues as a nonprofit. During the last few years, we've established 3 endowments here at Purdue for students with disabilities who are pursuing a degree in ag or who have lost a parent due to a farm accident. And that has generated a fair amount of revenue that's been used to support students here at Purdue. And then I've been associated with AgrAbility since the very beginning, and there's some interesting stories about the efforts that went into getting this program into the 1990 Farm Bill. And the support came from a variety of small nonprofits across the country. And that just supported the idea of having funding available for this kind of work as a pilot. Started with 8 small projects that were funded, and they were at the time on a matching basis, which is a kind of an interesting twist because we're seeing USDA return to doing some of its funding with a matching, which requires external support for the funds that do come in. So I want to jump in and talk about a little bit about our vision here. And I can't imagine with a vision of that AgrAbility has of enhancing the quality of life for farmers and ranchers, ag workers, their families, their children that have been impacted by disabilities as being something that is that's too hard to sell. That simple vision has been with us for a long time, and I think it's incredibly important that you have a vision statement that is behind what you're trying to do. I can't count the number of people that come to me and want to raise money or are interested in exploring how to raise money. And my first question is, why are they raising money? What's their vision? What's their mission? And oftentimes the money seems to be the focus. And I think one of the things that or perspectives that I have is that money is secondary. Is that once you have a vision that you're committed to, I think that then you have a place to start from, a springboard to leap off of that enables you to sell that point to other people. We have an incredibly powerful vision statement in AgrAbility that should sell itself, especially in this time as we've tried to bring about more inclusion of people into programs like this. Okay. So, yep. All right. So let me I apologize for the delays that seems to be occurring here and moving from one slide to the next, but we're making it happen. I just want as you're sitting here and participating in this and thinking about, how do I raise money for what I do? I want you to think more broadly than just AgrAbility. That's what we're talking about today, but how do you raise money for anything that you believe in? And so I want to have you sort of reestablish what your mission statement is for you personally as you help organizations become successful. Do you believe in the vision of AgrAbility, for example? Is your commitment demonstrated by both faith and good deeds? It's amazing how many people talk about how they really like what we do or they work within the AgrAbility field and yet have done probably quite little as far as tangible support for that effort. And I think that's something that you all have to weigh as you sit down at the end of the year and assess how you give and so forth, is that are you committed to some things out there in a tangible way in order to be more than just words, just speaking support or saying, I really like what you're doing. Are you actually supplying something in a tangible way to make that successful? So are you invested in this thing? And if you're involved in any nonprofit, I don't care whether it was when we were trying to run a therapeutic horseback riding program, or I was serving on the board of Easter Seal or the Society to Prevent Blindness, whatever it might have been, was there an investment? Were we seeing this as more of a stepping stone for our own professional development, or was it a means of us investing our time, our talents, our money into making something successful? So I just want you to think about it. How invested are you in some of the programs that you're trying to support? And then do you communicate that passion that you have to others? Or is it just something you demonstrate during a particular time, but is it something that sometimes people might even say you've become a little nauseating because that's what you talk about? Well, because it's important to you. And you may have to just put up with a little of that. I think that all of us have been around people that are incredibly passionate about some things, and sometimes they drive us nuts, but quite frankly, that's what builds programs, and successful programs are people that have passion, they've been invested into it, and they're willing to communicate that to other people. I want to argue quite vigorously that AgrAbility has been an incredibly important investment into rural people's lives and rural communities. I was just playing with some of the numbers for this presentation. I don't think I've ever seen this done before, and it's not complete, but it's kind of a ballpark. But if you look at the last 30 years of USDA funding, well over $100 million has been invested in rural communities and the lives of rural people and the lives of professionals who are developing their skills in this area. If you look at the supplemental funding that's been brought in, those complementary proposals that have been written that have supported AgrAbility mission, it's got to be over 10 million based on just my knowledge of projects around the country. It could be actually twice that amount because there are some projects that were funded by a variety of USDA programs that are no longer part of AgrAbility, but they still are doing some work in this area because of those residual funds. Then you look at Department of Labor funds that have been brought in, Department of Education, including RSA and NIDER and so forth. HHS money, the Centers for Disease Control, has funded projects in this area with some of the state projects. And then vocational rehabilitation, this is a low ball. If I wanted to dig into a little bit, for example, Wisconsin, which leads the amount of money being pulled into AgrAbility through VR, we have had some very strong success for the last 20 years working with vocational rehabilitation and continue to do so, providing services that would never have been provided, I don't think, if AgrAbility hadn't been pushing those things. Corporate support for the NTW, just going back and just the cash that's come in to pay for stipends for farmers to attend the NTW has exceeded 1.5 million. And then you have nonprofit support, things that you may not have thought much about, but Easter Seals and Goodwill and Arthritis and Farm Bureau and all those kind of nonprofit groups out there, including churches and sororities and fraternities. I have no idea what it is, but I have a sense what it is just for our project here in Indiana. And we've gone through a couple of dry spells when we did not get funded, and we were able to be supported by those contributions during that period of time. Individual giving, I just processed 2 checks here. I had to sign off on them. One, actually there was 3, but 2 I want to mention. One was for 25,000 and one was for 400. And both are individual donors that have come alongside of AgrAbility and want to support us moving forward with the next NTW and doing face-to-face activities because they see the value of that with the farmers and the impact it's had on farmers who have attended the NTW. And so we've started off with a nice chunk for the next face-to-face NTW. The $400 came in as a gift from a family that saw the benefit of AgrAbility services, and they just wanted to send us a check, and that came in Friday. And I know it sounds like a little bit of money, but when we've been doing this for a long time, it's kind of exciting that people actually feel strongly enough that they're willing to sit down and write a check. And that's to me, that's kind of cool. But if you look at the last piece here, which some of us sort of neglect, is that 106 million or more that's come in from USDA has come in with no indirect charges. If this was any other project out there paying normal indirect of around 30 to 40% at the university level, that money would not be used for support of this program. So there's 40 to 50 million dollars that have been that's supported through the land grant system and through the way in which these funds have been received that's allowed it to go directly into benefiting farm families out there. Sources of support. If you look at the data on giving in the United States, the #1 source is still individuals. Most of you, we run after, the big projects and so forth. But if you can build a following of clientele and neighbors and friends, and people that know you, that remains the single biggest source of income to nonprofits, are those checks that people write on their personal checkbooks, or they drop those dollar bills, in a fundraising basket, whatever it is. And we need to think about how we build relationships with individuals who care about what we're doing. Corporations and businesses are incredibly important, and you need to build some relationships with some people that are like-minded. Most of us don't think of going after funds from nonprofits, but that concept of nonprofits is much broader than just the disability organizations that are up there. And I just went back and looked at where we're getting some of our supports, and they include groups like disability organizations, veterans groups over the years, farm organizations, sororities. We've gotten funding from churches where it's benefited some members of their church. Community foundations all have been contributors to this whole thing. So state and federal agencies, that's what we're thinking of, is most of the time when we're going after grants and so forth. A lot of money is given by state and federal agencies. It takes a lot of work. Anyone that's written an AgrAbility proposal or any kind of federal proposal realizes how much time it takes and commitment to follow through on it. And then we've also benefited from some estates and trusts in which someone has left funds in their wills, and again, it's I think it's something we ought to be thinking more about. Is that many organizations have someone working specifically on building relationships with those who can possibly leave a legacy. So
Bill,
yes.
we have a question, and really it's about the slide before, but it still applies here too. So
okay, let's go back.
So with the data sources or with the revenue sources, is there data that shows that is keeping individuals with disability and helping themselves to support themselves without receiving government disability? So is there, there's two different questions, I'm trying to combine them. So based on the sources, is there data to show that this money is helping individuals support themselves without receiving government disability checks in the future?
Well, it's a great question. And if you look at VR funding, for example, there's been a lot of research to show the return on investment of VR money that is shared at an 80-20 match between state and federal government. And so it has been seen for years as an excellent return on investment. Some will go as high as, for every dollar invested in putting a person back to work, is the ultimate outcome is about $7. So it's about a 7-fold increase. So we have never, in my experience here, gone beyond individual or anecdotal data to look at putting someone back to work on a farm as to what it has done. We've actually had a few cases where we looked at pretty closely, and they got quite a bit of attention at USDA. And again, they were case studies rather than broad-based returns on investments. But we did show, for example, pulling people off of welfare payments, or pulling people out of where they were initially being paid on SSDI and other sources of funds, where they actually began paying taxes again. And I think, to me, that's one of the success stories, is when the people we work for see themselves as now taxpayers and employers, rather than being someone that's dependent upon either federal or state sources of dollars. It's impossible to put all the people that we're thinking about out there. Like 19% of the farm population indicate that there are jobs they can no longer perform because of a disability. I don't think the question or the solution is here putting them all on some kind of disability payment. I think it's to try to get them back engaged and working, and where they're, heaven forbid, paying taxes again, because that's the real success, is whether or not they're working and living independently and reaching some of their own personal goals. great question. Is to, $200 million has been invested. I'm convinced that the return on that investment has been incredible.
Mhm.
When we started and the AgrAbility program in 1990, some of our earliest projects were, for example, how to make county fairs accessible. In Indiana, I can't tell you, but it's probably been in excess of $50 million that have been contributed by foundations to improve the accessibility of county fairgrounds. That had nothing to do with AgrAbility in a sense, but we helped motivate that by doing county level assessments and then bringing those concerns to the county fair boards. And then they went to their community foundations and generated the money to make those fairgrounds accessible to everybody. So that's a big return on investment.
Mhm.
So great question. Okay, we mentioned why people give. I think one of the most important things is mission alignment. Is you got to figure out if you're somehow scratching people where they itch. And I'm just struck sometimes that what makes people align with our mission statement, and some of you may have experienced that, and they sit down and do some incredibly interesting things. Another reason is faith-based reasons. I grew up in a community, or my family and people I grew up with, we were all taught at an early age that part of what you earn goes to God. And so we had kind of this tithing concept that I still use. And literally millions of Americans are faith-based givers. And what we're doing, I think, is a reflection of good things. And we see people that give to our program here and across the country because it's the right thing to do, and they feel it's fulfilling part of their faith-based lifestyle. Tax advantages. I think it's been kind of cute. I'll give you a quick story. I had a lawyer in town who donated a horse. I don't know how many of you ever had a horse donated, but we've had a few horses donated. And I found out that his horse was written off as a tax deduction for $14,000. Well, we turned around and sold the horse for like $1,200 or $1,300. And then he wanted to give me another horse. And I said, well, I can only take the horse if I get half of what your tax exemption is going to be. So if you're going to take a $14,000 deduction, I want 7 of them. And then I'll take your horse. And he was not excited about giving me many more horses, but we have had horses given, and then we've turned around and sold them. We've had land given. We've had all kinds of things for tax advantages. And you just need to encourage people that they're going to pay taxes, especially if they're older and they're rolling over an IRA or something, is that they're going to pay taxes on that. And this may be a way for them to be supportive. Some people give because of guilt. Imagine somebody's listening in here today that the last time they gave to someone is because they just felt guilty. And, I'm not going to knock that, but it's, I know I've felt guilt at times when I met somebody or saw somebody in a need, but I'm just pointing out how people give or why they give. And then some give to establish a legacy. We've got 2 endowed scholarships at Purdue, both named after individuals. One is for students who have lost a parent due to a farm accident. The other is to support a student pursuing a degree in agriculture with a disability. And both of those were named after individuals who endowed the original scholarships. And then we've helped them to grow substantially since those endowments were established. So that's a legacy that somebody wanted to leave behind. And it might be something that some of us might want to do. I could see I see Mary Beasley on the line. I don't know Mary well, but I could suggest that having the Beasley Scholarship at some location might be kind of cool to leave as a legacy. And I don't mean to pick on Mary, but I just saw her name come up on the screen. Okay. What people give, what we like is money. I mean, that's really nice. And it's easy to handle. We used to have people mail us cash in envelopes, and we've really discouraged that because it gets really messy in our system. We prefer checks. People give time. I think time is incredibly important. I try to actually personally give time in my life to things that have nothing to do with making me richer or famous or whatever. And it's just time that I commit to, whether it be helping fill bags at the food pantry or whatever it is. I mean, I'm not stretching my brain too much, but it's just work that needs to be done, and I've always found that to be enjoyable. So time is an important element that people give. Expertise. Some of us have freely given our expertise in different ways. We give connections. You know people who know people who know people, and the next thing you know, you're in a relationship that helps support what you're trying to do. And then some people give stuff. And I can't, I mentioned about getting horses. Since we've started the NTW, we've had hundreds and hundreds of items donated for our annual auction. And some have been very minor things. Some have been worth thousands of bucks. And people have donated those to be sold at auction. And that money has gone without any indirect, all to support stipends for farmers. And that's why in some of the years, we've been able to bring 50, 60 or more farmers and their families to the NTW. We've been given tractors. I've been given a combine. This is a kind of a cute story I'll just bring because it just shows the scope. I used to have an ad on the radio that played every now and then because it was donated by the local radio station. And one day I got a call from a trucker on I-65 north of Lafayette heading southbound with a load of hay. And he said to me, "God told me to stop and call you and donate this load of hay to you." And I said, "Well, I don't really have a place for a load of hay, but I think I can find something." And by golly, he showed up the next morning with about 12 tons of hay, and we unloaded it and in a barn, and ended up being used. And it was kind of a weird donation. And then Purdue had me fill out a form, and the trucker had to fill it out as to why he gave. And it said, because God told me to. And I think that's one of the few documents that floated through the Purdue system with that on it. But that was 12 tons of hay that was donated spontaneously as a result of a radio spot that this trucker heard on the air as he was coming through town. He didn't even live in this area. We've been given food. I think of we have a little hot dog operation, and of life of me, I can't remember the name of it. That's terrible. Dogs and Suds, a little ad here for them. And I just made a comment that we were going to do a fundraiser. And he said, "Well, I'll provide enough hot dogs, buns, and coleslaw and chips for 150 people." So that just suddenly saved us all the money that we needed to have kind of a meal with these people. So food's been kind of another weird one, if you want to call things weird. But I had a restaurant owner contact me because we had done some work for a relative of his, and he turned his restaurant over to us for a night. And we used volunteers to come in. The cooks there at the restaurant donated their time. The waitresses, we acted as support help, clean up. We did all the dishes, and all the money that was raised that night, even the tips, everything was written in a check form and was sent to us to support our program. And that was based on the relationship between the owner of the restaurant and somebody that we had serviced. So just think of all kinds of creative ways to do this. Being proactive in this is really important. Believe that what you're doing is valuable and not being embarrassed by it. Some of us we don't have because we don't ask. I guess I'm as guilty as that as any, because I don't feel that I'm really good at asking. Be bold but not obnoxious. Have an elevator speech, and then also have a short list of what your needs are and prioritize them. Let people know, but they don't want a 25-page document sometimes, unless you're writing a proposal. And then be patient. I can take you to a person that has supported our program for many years. And the first time I went to meet him thinking that he might be interested, he asked me to leave his office. And it was really awkward for me because he just felt like this was absolutely a waste of time and money putting a farmer back on a piece of machinery. And he asked me to leave. And it was a couple years later that we had a connection, and he thought about that. He felt like he'd been kind of harsh on me, but we opened the door, and he's been an incredible supporter ever since. And then pursue win-win opportunities. You don't want to be just on the receiving end. You want those giving to you sometimes to win also, where they actually, like, a company. If you look at our website on the front page, we have sponsorships there, and those companies appreciate that name recognition. So it's a win-win for everybody. And then remember to say thank you. We are in a generation. I know I've taught in the classroom for almost 50 years, and every semester I've had classes. I have 3 classes this semester. And I think what we're losing is that sense of gratitude. And I don't know if anyone agrees with me or not. I'm just going by what I experience with college students and younger, is that we often fail to say thank you when something nice is done to you. So even after they say no and they're blunt about it, thank them for just listening. After they say, "We'll think about it," say thank you, because they've taken the time to think about it, and then if they say yes, especially. So like today, one of my chores before I leave today is to write 2 thank you notes for the checks that we got in this past week, and to make sure the people that donated them are recognized and that what they have given is appreciated. So don't be hesitant about, even if 2 people say thank you for the same thing. That's not, don't worry about it. If it's benefited other people, you probably have been part of some group where you all got together and sent, someone an encouragement card. You could have made just one encouragement card and sent it by email. I'm telling my staff, I encourage you to sit down and write a note. That comes across as very unusual today, and people have called me up and say, "I really appreciate your note." So don't just rely on the computers. Resources are almost unlimited out there. We have on our website, agrability.org, a funding assistance section that is multiple pages long. It lists all kinds of agencies and organizations that you might consider tapping locally. Not all of them are going to give you money. Not all of them are going to be supportive, but at least they have proven in some locations in some states to work. And then also explore the fundraising strategies that are found on the internet by just typing in learning how to fundraise. Try that sometime, just learning how to fundraise. There are books, there are Wikipedia sites, there is consultants that put their stuff up there, and everybody has a different perspective on fundraising. And some of them have been terribly successful. That's not a good term. They've been incredibly successful in raising funds. Others teach you how to fundraise to make money. Personally, I think I'd want to tap the expertise of those who actually have done it and have run a program or have helped a program grow because of successful fundraising activities. And they don't typically charge you $1,000 a day to do that. And some of these are people like, just look around your community. Who runs the food bank? Who runs the hotline or the stress line? Or who runs the pregnancy resource center or whatever it is? All these are nonprofits that raise money, and just call them up and see if they'd sit down with you for a few minutes and ask, how do they do this and how does it work for them? I don't think you're going to find many of them really selfish about their techniques. Some of them are just by their nature very giving people, and see what you're typically trying to do as something that complements the community, and they're going to be supportive of it. I want to just thank everybody that's been a part of supporting AgrAbility for the last 30 years. We're in our 30th year thereabouts. As I pointed out, we've raised hundreds of millions of dollars. A lot of it's we'll never be able to document because of literally hundreds of thousands of dollars of items that have been donated. I just, things that come to mind is Walter, who ends up in a wheelchair, a farmer, and his local Lions Club comes out, and Steve Swain was our AT guy, and he needed a pad where he could park his now accessible van and be able to transfer. And some calls were made, and next thing you know, the Lions come out, built the forms, dug out the driveway. The local concrete guy came and poured the cement, and everybody smoothed it off. They all put their fingerprints or their handprints in the concrete as a sign of their involvement. And Walt ended up with a what would have cost several $1,000s just to provide a pad for him to transfer from his van into the garage of his house. And I can think of dozens of these type of things that have literally, you can never put a price tag on them, because it'd be even hard to communicate that as I think of, for example, every time we've ever gone to Lowe's or Home Depot and told them we're building an accessible ramp, I'm amazed at how often they don't even charge us for the stuff. And we've done that with people, that I know at church and other things, and they just see that as part of their giving back to the community. And all we need to do is say thank you for that. I want to thank all the AgrAbility staff, who've seen this as a place to invest their life. I can't, some of you out there have worked on this thing for years, and you could have made more money doing something else, but you've just committed yourself to this because you see the value in it. And then I want to thank all the farmers and ranchers who have allowed us to help them and to serve them by being a part of this whole thing and seeing the value of returning to work and the joy that comes with that. And if they wouldn't let us be a part of their life, this never could have happened. We just we've been able to approach them with a servant spirit, and they've seen that, and they've allowed us to come into their lives, into their homes. Yesterday, I spent a couple hours in a home in northern Indiana on one of my outings. I'm still doing outings. I don't know if it's legal or not where you are, but to me, that's what I live on, thrive on. And just to see the joy that comes about having someone come in their home and visit with them and talk about issues on accessibility and trying to figure things out, and doing it on a face-to-face basis. And I think that's what's made us successful. So I do appreciate very much when a farmer opens their door and lets us come in and lets us be a part of their life. So if you have any questions, would you please write them on a nice, crisp $20 bill and send them in care of me here at Purdue. And I will respond to all those questions. I don't hear any laughter there at all, but that's just a joke, okay? But does anyone have any questions?
Beverly, do you want to unmute yourself and share the story about the Bavarian Inn restaurant?
Sure. Bavarian Inn restaurant in Frankenmuth, Michigan contacted Ned Stoller. I'm sure many of you know him, in January, telling us that they had selected AgrAbility as their charity for the year. We had a regional training there some years ago that maybe some of you attended. That was at the Bavarian Inn Hotel, but there's also a restaurant as well. It's got a very long and rich history, and the original founder still cooks in the kitchen. She was part of that founding generation, and I think she had her 100th birthday, or she's very close to that. But so the person who promoted AgrAbility to them was at one time the chairman of the Beef Preview show that the MSU Alpha Gamma Rho chapter does for us, which they couldn't do this year. But that fundraiser has been pulling in $20,000 that we use for assistive technology for farmers. It's a huge fundraiser done by boys between the ages of 18 and 22. So, think about that. So he was one of the chairmen of that at one time and suggested AgrAbility as their charity for the year. So they have donation cans sitting out around the restaurant. And then there are some different events and activities, and we don't know exactly, they're not designated as their fundraiser, but there are some things that we will probably be involved in, and that will be shaping up as in the next couple of months. So, but it's it's a very, very well-known restaurant beyond the borders of Michigan. So that's just really exciting, and it's just because one person grabbed onto that from another experience. So it's pretty exciting.
Thank you. And we do have another question. We have some comments in the chat, but we do have another question that I live in Oregon and desperately want AgrAbility in this state. I created a nonprofit farm school to do some of the AgrAbility stuff. How do I get your program here? The person will send a rumpled $20 bill, not a crisp one.
We'll take the rumpled ones too. No. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, in order to have an AgrAbility program, it's required under the Farm Bill to go through Oregon State University. You got to go through the land grant institution there. Or if you haven't, I think in Oregon, there's at least one 1994 institution that's Native American. So it needs to go through one of those organizations or agencies in order to apply. So we have actually been in Oregon to try to build a critical mass there of individuals who are interested in forming an AgrAbility network to make a application. And I'm not sure where those are now, but I know we were there, did workshops or so forth. But I would encourage you to try to get together someone at Oregon State, and we can maybe try to identify one or two parties there that might be interested, and so that you can start visiting with them. We have some projects that actually receive no USDA funding, but they are kind of an affiliate and they've raised their money. One of the things we did several years ago, and it did work for some, is that we met with Farm Credit Service in Washington, and they allocated $5,000 seed money in every U.S. state to help establish a critical mass for AgrAbility. And we had very few actually apply for that, but that some of these farm agencies, farm credit agencies, are open to being supportive to get something started. If you want to visit with someone that went through a process, Dick Brzezowski at Maine started out a program. I remember flying up there, meeting with his team before they even started writing a proposal. And we went on a couple of tours, we met with VR, and they just continued to work at it. And now they have a successful AgrAbility program. So, and if anyone wants to call and talk later about this, feel free to get a hold of me or Paul Jones. We'll do our best to help you through that.
Great. Thank you very much. And on behalf of all the comments, Bill, we really appreciate your servant leadership, and your comments today have been very helpful. And as you may see in the chat box, Tess did put the link to the evaluation. Please finish that. Please complete the survey before you leave today's meeting. And hopefully we will see all of you and more of you next Tuesday at the same time, at the same channel. Thank you.
Thank you.